Hello, everyone. Welcome to Art Salon. I'm Ellie Shore. I've been running art salons here for 4.5 years. And I met Erman at a show that Rolando Chang gave in Boynton Beach at the Boynton Beach Arts District. And that was quite a few years ago. And it was a beautiful piece. It was a long, kind of ethereal, sheer dress hanging from the ceiling. And there was a little table and chairs that a child would use under it. And I thought, wow, how interesting. I've never seen anything like this, and this is beautiful. And I met Erman and have continued to see his work and the different ways in which he tells his stories and the different kinds of materials that he uses. They're always fascinating. He uses material however he feels compelled to in order to advance the story that he's telling. It's always having something to do with immigration and memory and moving from one place to another. He comes from Cuba. He came here at the age of 13. He not only does artwork, but he designs women's clothing and maybe men's clothing too, I'm not sure. Wedding gowns, clothing for special occasions, and he creates the things that he designs. He's going to be telling you more about it. Juan Antonio Gonzalez.
I did come from Cuba in 1969, and that I want to repeat only because the first thing my mom said to me when we got off the plane, when in China, ching chong. So that's how come I am hablando en chino, speaking Chinese. That also doubled up as, what are we really saying through our art and who understands us? Because it can be a very personal trip. And I do a lot of it on the sewing machine. My background is in the science. The only degree that I have, it's in microbiology. My mother did not want me to follow in her footsteps because it was faggy. And I would hear that constantly. But I gave her the science diploma for her birthday with a big red bow on it and moved to New York and started the fashion business that Elle was mentioning. And since then, for other reasons, it's expanded. But I do a lot of sewn work, and this is me at the sewing machine. That little piece that you're seeing that I'm embroidering took about 1.5 years. Not of constant work, because I'm not that dedicated to such eye-abusing work, since my eyes are pretty much gone already at this point from so many years of working in bad light and etc. But this is part of an installation, Los Trapos Sucios, that literally translates to airing my dirty laundry. In 2002, somebody came down from Ohio and challenged me to curate something with all Cuban fiber artists in it. And I'm like, what leads you to believe that I can find 10 Cuban fiber artists? You think people are knitting on Flagler Street? I mean, and also for political reasons of funding and getting an exhibition to travel was very pricey. Getting a catalog printed was very pricey. So I turned it into deep blue Caribbean American statements. And I found artists from all over the Caribbean that were working very much in the vein of what I wanted to talk about. From that came a career for myself as a visual artist that was exposing his own work, which had been closeted since I was a little kid, because I'm never going to make a living from it, and it's faggy. I kept hearing this in the back of my head, and it stopped me for years. But I figure, we are who we are, and this is what I like to do. So from that show that I curated, the one and only show that I ever curated that wound up traveling to like 5 different states and being cataloged and etc. And it was called Deep Blue Caribbean-American Statements. I made a visual art careers for myself. It kind of like opened the door, because one of the galleries that I was romancing in the design district to take the show in Miami, Diaspora Vibe Art Gallery, when she was looking at the information that I had gathered of all the different artists, and I actually went there for her assistance because Rosie Gordon-Wallace is a specialist in the Caribbean diaspora. So she worked with me, but ultimately she wound up wanting to represent my work that had never been seen before except in my living room and in my closet. So out of that, she gave me a solo show, and this was called Los Trapos Sucios, the installation, airing my dirty laundry. The show itself, I actually forget what it was called, and it doesn't matter. But I installed a clothesline inside a gallery using what I then considered to be praying stations. And those of us that might have grown in a Catholic upbringing, there's that time of year when you do the stations and you go pray in all the different stations. So I used that concept that I had been brought up in, which was Roman Catholicism, and I had people going to different stations, and this was when a house is not a home. The pretty window, it's the front, and the jail cell window, it's the back, and that spoke contextually about my own house, and Gladys, my mom, who I grew up with, she ran a very pretty house where nothing could be dirty, where I had to sit down to pee because the bathroom couldn't be dirty, you know, all these different things. So it was really like a jail for me. This is Para Subir al Cielo, to reach the sky. Para subir al cielo se necesita una escalera grande y una chiquita. That's a copla. A copla has this kind of beat, and it's something from my grandmother's town of Galicia, Spain, and she used to sing me this song when I was a little kid. So when I turned 50, I got my grandmother's death for my birthday, and I started doing a lot of work to honor the relationship that we had had, since in the Gladys household, she was the only unconditional love that I had ever experienced. And this has, it actually travels very much like a prayer station did in the olden days, or a reliquary that you wear around your neck. The box closes, everything falls, breaks down, and you can take it to the next place and travel and go to the sky all over again. It's a mixed media piece. It's built wood, it's ceramic, it's got grains in it. In this particular case, it's white rice all in here because you have to eat before you climb those stairs. And then you can take whatever trip you want. And I've kept making reference to having a trip since 1969, when on November 3rd, I spoke Spanish on Tuesday, and that was it. Ching chong. Remember how I opened. Now we have to be like here, put on your batteries. When in America, you have to do ta-da-da-da. We were mainstreamed right away, and thanks to my grandmother, I still speak Spanish fluently, because that was totally discouraged. My Miami, my America, was not at all like all the chances that Latinos get now, which is why even I don't understand their complaints sometimes. This is Fumao, which is one of the stations there. Tobacco was like pig's belly in Cuba, that and sugar. But Fumao, it's also something, a street term for being stoned. And I first smoked marijuana when I was 13. And this had a double entendre to it. But the reality is that tobacco grows, and then it's turned upside down to dry. And I was making that reference to the Cuban crop. The green leaves are all fabricated in organza, and they have the stitched veins and everything. And the brown leaves are actually dry tobacco leaves that I enclosed in tulle and stitched the vein pattern that they had. and all the piece still exists, but all the tobacco broke down, so now I have like crumbled tobacco at the end of all the leaves and the pattern stitched, which makes a real good reference to smoking it also, because once you burn it, it's gone. This is the piece that Elle was talking about, and even though this was reinstalled later on for a survey of my work that traveled the United States, this was originally from that installation, Los Trapos Sucios, and this is called El Plato Nacional, the national dish. What's enclosed in the brick pattern, black beans and rice and a bay leaf, which are the three main ingredients for moros, which is that mixture of white rice with black beans mixed together, but that already comes cooked as a dish. But moro, it's also a double entendre that I lived with all my life because my dad is black and my mom is white. So until I was 13 years old, I was a moro, very much like a biracial kid here. It's called an Oreo or something like that. And in order for us to come to the United States, my dad was taken to a work concentration camp, and my mom became the sole breadwinner for my family, and that was a really drastic transition for an ex-beauty queen from a rich family, etc., and I wanted to honor and aggrandize her efforts. And I also wanted to touch on the fact that we lived with a rationing book. That's how come the rice and beans are all partitioned in these little pockets. This started as 4 codes, and it turned out to be 15 or 16 codes. And it's La Sangre Llama, which basically translates to blood calls, but it really means something like blood is thicker than water. And all the codes have link sleeves, and they travel in this ghostly matter. I made the fabric from recycled veil, wedding veils, and trapped in it, there are all these different color threads, and it looks very much like the sanguinary system and a membrane. So again, I was speaking about the many years that we were seamstresses and tailors and honoring that part of doing piecework in a factory and having these mixed bloodlines. So this starts on a wall and it travels all around the air in the gallery, and it winds up in that needle, and that needle, it's hand fabricated wood, and it's 6 feet long. This is me installing at Broward Community College in Davie. That's the campus that hosted the opening of this exhibition that ultimately traveled through the United States. They printed a catalog for it, and Erica James, who was then the director of the National Gallery of the Bahamas, did a really wonderful intro for the catalog, and she explained my work, how she saw it, and it was wonderful to hear what other people were seeing. So I didn't have to talk Chinese anymore because the fact that somebody wrote academically about the work and she put information to it that resonated with me, but having had a science degree, I didn't know anything about art academia or, that it would get written about and compared to other artists and who paved the way. And she did all of this in that raisonné, I think it's the term, and it was a wonderful experience for me. But anyways, you walked into this hallway that was 50 feet long, and it was all, I wood laid these buttons that the smallest one was 14 inches across, and then I stitched the room together and wrote stream of consciousness all on the walls about the previous generations of women in my family and how they had stitched my life together. And ultimately, even though I started with 4 codes that were called blood calls, La Sangre Llama, I ultimately call the whole piece a stitch in time. And this is what that hallway entering to the gallery space looked like. This is work from 2004. A white close line means a lot of different things to me. And one of the things that it means is pretty much like rebirth, because here are these same clothes, but they're nice and clean, and every time you wear it, this shirt has a rebirth, and you can have a rebirth with it by wearing it. This is familia, and it's paper and fabric that's recycled, stitched to ute, like sack fabric, and the whole thing, it's 36-inch square. This is in a private collection at Utah State University, and this is La Jaula, the cage. I broke my cage by defying scissors and threads and doing whatever I wanted to do with my life. But that's still my mother with her pursed lips, like saying, I'll get you, I'll get you. And all the fabrics, when they're there, all the white that you're looking at, it's hand-cut paper. And all the fabric that you're looking at had been shirts and bed sheets or something before. I go to the Salvation Army or the Goodwill, and the way that painters buy hues of paints in tubes at Pearl or whatever they go, I buy shirts and things for the different greens, and I take them apart or cut them up, and those are my hues. And then I need transparent and translucent, so I would be looking for green chiffon and green organza and green, so that it looks very painterly, but it's all layer and stitch except for the white. This is nosotros. It's basically my wife and I have been married for 34 years, and we're Siamese twins. And both La Jaula and nosotros are from the window people. In 2006, I was granted a UNESCO residency, and this took place in Brazil at the Sacatar Foundation, Fundação Sacatar, in the Bay of Bahia, in an island called Itaparica. And I was given 3 months to live there, and nothing was asked of me, including making the work was not necessary. I was given the artistic residency because I proposed a program where I would be working with the abandoned children that were mostly addicted to inhalants and living in the sewer pipe and etc. And if they came to do art, they would get a lunch and a medical checkup, and they would walk away with a little something that was a more humane experience that they were having, because they're basically treated like vermin. And since then, I established that program in 2006, and Korean artists and Russian artists and an artist from India has done it also when they come to the Fundação Sacatar in Itaparica. But this is nosotros, us. There's handwriting here and here in pencil, and the man's side says ella, 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 and she, her, and the woman's side says él, him, he. And this was the window people, which I started to tell you. Up until then, my landscapes were all humanless. There was debris. There were things human had used when they were there, but you didn't see any living person be part of it until the window people started appearing. And I called it the window people because I did this chiaroscuro forehead thing on most every one of them. And in La Habana and in colonial architecture, that was pretty much a way that they got this mood lighting in these old buildings with that chiaroscuro type window tops. And they're usually, or many are, in colors like red and amber and emerald green. But I also wanted to stick to the fact that I had never done people, and I wanted to make sure that it was clear that if the white paper cuts were removed, the landscape still existed. So I didn't want to use colors. And this again, every time it's fabric, it's stitching with recycled fabrics, and the pretty clouds are surgical cotton. And it's all under tulle, and it's massively stitched and embroidered, and unfortunately, the camera doesn't really capture that part of my work. This is Ella, and Ella stopped being the beauty queen to be the housewife eventually. And if you see, she's removing her crown and she's wearing a teacup as a crown. People carrying things on their heads, both for practical and impractical purposes, have often been iconography in my work. I think there's a talent to femininity when they made you walk with those books in your heads and you couldn't drop the books, and a queen could be a cook also, which I told my mother many times, but she couldn't fry an egg. This is al fresco, and this is 36 inches by 56 inches, because the thread at the roots go all the way to the floor, even though this is at eye level on the wall. And it's a mixed media piece, and in here there's grain again, and I believe this one had white rice also. So each one of those garments is about 3 to 5 inches, and they're handmade ceramics. I was great with Play-Doh when I was a kid, and I got into ceramics with the same approach. This is how you do it, done. I don't know how to throw on the wheel or anything like that. Those technicalities have never been important to me. I just want something that looks like garments, and I want to tell this story. I often get these things in my dream. I have a little pad and pencil on my nightstand so that I can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning when I've seen this for 2.5 hours in my head, and I jot it down, and I really have no predisposition that it's going to be this, that way, and the other. It's like I have fabric, I have beans, let's just do it. It's usually how I work. And this was on the same theme. This is in a private collection in Brazil as a result of that residency on a world-renowned collection, I'm told. I really don't know that much about it, but it's a collection that actually it's cataloged in like the Library of Congress and all of that, and it's out of Salvador, the ACBU collection. And basically working off of prayer boxes and reliquaries, if you know what that is, when you wear something around your neck that supposedly has a piece of a saint's nail or a little bit of hair or something, and it's supposed to be like something that protects you, like an amulet, that's un relicario. There were also these prayer boxes from different religions that people travel by camel and they could set up their church in the desert, or it's not just Catholic. So using those two things together, I made a series called Libros, books. And the libro here, it's actually the box itself, it's all written. And the little chair is post-production goods from a dollhouse, and it fits right in this corner. You close the box, which is 13 by 13 by 2, and you travel with your box. And Libros is something that I gave up on, but I really enjoyed it while I did it. This is Ascensión, Descensión. Ascension, descension, it's got ladders. What comes up must go down, and some people are going down as others are going up, but there's always some traffic. This has black beans on the tabletop, and when you look inside the bust, it's a black night sky, and the island of Cuba, it's floating in the ocean on the bottom. It seems that distance to me even today, even though I'm able to pick up and go now. I'm still caught up between those waters of who am I gonna offend that suffered so much leaving there by me going back, and I haven't figured that one out. This is in a private collection in Pinecrest. This I did in Brazil. This is actually the first few people. I don't know if it happens to you, but when you're in conversation with people that think they know you or that want to know you, they start putting adjectives to you. You're so nice, you're so this, you're so that. Well, I have friends that have been my friends since the 7th grade when I got here. And as a matter of fact, we all got together for the holidays. And I started making notes of the things that I was according to them. And then I went out to illustrate these adjectives, and sometimes they were not pretty, and sometimes they were names, not even adjectives. And I wound up illustrating 10 while I was in Brazil, and I called the piece, "I've Been Called Worse." And it's the property of the PAM Museum, the Perez Art Museum, Miami, in their permanent collection. And this again, it's fabric and cut paper. I told one of the girls that worked in the kitchen in Brazil, like, necesito tela roja. And I could do a little bit of Portuñol, and Spanish was close enough that she brought me a kitchen rag that had never been used in red, and that's his shirt. His shirt was a brand new kitchen rag. And these, if anybody here, it's a sewer or an embroiderer or a quilter, the best way that I can describe this is that they're reverse applique. The paper, it's on top, and the color that you see, it's a whole picture in the back. So I actually worked a picture as large as the 8x11 or whatever they are, but it gets covered by where the white, it's more important. And this is the first, I call this a wall book in 10 parts, and I've done others since. But this is, I've Been Called Worse. These are some of the other ones. Name what? Okay, I have some timers. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I don't. But, so we're gonna let that one go. This is another installation. I usually get challenged. I also want at this point to sell that I've yet to be happy with my work. There's no critic in the world that could break me down because I had Gladys. Let's not forget that. And I'm my worst critic. It's not, is it pretty or is it telling this story or that story? Because I know it is, and I know it's successful because I'm part of the audience and I see other artists work. But the problem is, did I do it well? I challenged myself. So at the time that I was invited to present this exhibition, it's a solo show, and this was Casas Viajantes y Voladoras, traveling and flying houses. If you see, they're starting to fly off the floor, and you see the shadows on the wall, and etc. I did a collaboration with Dinora de Jesus Rodriguez here, and she used some actors and dancers, and she took the houses in the streets, and they were pulling it, and she filmed all of that. So there was a huge wall-size movie of her working with my pieces. This was a really nice thing. But basically, my houses were like this empty A-frame, and I wanted to speak about how we're not empty just because we're displays. But I also wanted to give importance to what do people give importance to. Like when you move from state to state or from country to country, if you're not running for your life, what is it that you bring? What's important? Are your clothes important? It's a memory important? It's a notion important? I mean, what do you bring? And how cyclical is this rhythm that these houses developed wings and flew into a quilted sky that you don't see in the gallery picture, but it's a quilted sky about 12 feet by 5 feet in a frame of the same pine wood, and they would fly and come back, and it was like this spiritual recycling. And why do we carry all this stuff for so long, and then one day you go, I can't believe I've held onto this shit for so many years, I don't even like it. And you've been giving it like prime real estate in a drawer. So I had all these things in mind when I did this, and I'm sorry about the 4-letter word, but it's not going to be the only one. Oh, and here, this is Casas Viajantes and Voladoras, and this was Casas Estables, and that's another book in 10 parts. And the beauty of this work was that if you shuffle the houses, you tell a different story, but it's still a solid story from beginning to end. And I've actually forgotten about that because I stuck it in a box and it's somewhere in my studio. See the quilted sky there in a frame? And this is what I'm grateful for, that I found Rosie Gordon-Wallace when that deep blue American statement when I was challenged, because in her gallery, I was a regular artist that had open door policy and no expectations. She never asked me for work that sells or work that's finished or an idea that's worked through or anything like that. I was treated like her space was an incubator space, and I taught myself basically there whatever I wanted, and it was a really great experience. I could never pay her back. This is a still of that house. Another one. These pieces started selling individually. That whole installation only exists as a photograph. A house within a house. What do people carry? That pile of clothes, the last shirt, it's like, beam me up, Scotty. I work a lot with shoes. I was a shoe salesman through high school, and that's how I paid my way through college. They're great sculptures, but above and beyond that, we all wear them. Shoes are a worldwide commonality for me, so I've done a lot of work with shoes. And here's somebody who is not going out to sea anytime soon. These 3 pieces were the multiple layer drawings that one went on the wall and another one went in front of it so many inches and another one floated in front of it with filament so many inches, and there was movement and the atmosphere when people walked by it, things moved. They were really, really very beautiful pieces, and then I had to frame them. I didn't like them framed that much, but they're gone. So basically we have no hay corona sin espina. There's no crown without thorns. And I did a cutout that I use as a stencil. I did a drawing, and then I made this crown out of paper that kind of like sits in between. This is pastoral, and it's the same idea. When you look through the trees, there's these close lines floating there, and that's El Rey de Todo y de Nada, the king of everything and nothing. That one's in Canada. And that's what you see in that king of everything and nothing once he's not blocked. This work I brought today, and you can inspect it later. Basically, my mom died, Gladys, on September 19th last year. And I just started working like really savagely. And I have a lot of work and no exhibition as of yet. And this is ella. She is transparent. she's birthing a clothesline and it's going through her, and at her worst, she was still a good egg. And I honor my mother, Gladys Maria Petrazoila Garcia Grandillo, with this piece. When I was a child in Cuba, we raised rabbits for food and commerce. And there's little rabbits here and there, like in the garden. My grandmother would say, they have no names, they're food, they have no names. This is cut paper. This is nosotros. Having a conversation with Gladys, she said to me, I don't know what's happening to me, I'm just an empty cage. And that stayed with me because my mom developed Alzheimer's as well as lung cancer, and she never smoked. So I'm not really sure where that came from. It might have been environmental or just her ticket out, because you don't know. So I started working with the idea of egg mutations. This is something that I had to invent to pacify myself, because I was always so imperfect, according to her, that if scientifically we're an egg that mutates and becomes who we are, and religiously we're created in the image of our creator, whoever she may be, then we're all good egg mutations. And that's where I started making these people that were either becoming people or becoming birds, and they're still traveling and dealing with their thing. I have a brother. I also do chair portraits. I don't know why, but when I see abandoned chairs on the side of the road, I take photographs with my phone of how they were abandoned. I don't dress the stage or anything, and then I use the physicality of that photograph to create works such as this one, which is 8 by 10, and it's in a refurbished frame that used to be at her parents' house, and I just painted white, and this is all embroidered. Those recycled fabrics, and this is called Se acabó la guerra, war is over. Estuvimos hablando, we were talking. This is a small piece also from that same series. This is all paper and fabric with stitching. The three pieces that were multiple layer drawings and this one were shown together at Universidad del Sagrado Corazón in Santurce, Puerto Rico, for a multicultural event that I was invited to participate in. And I never thought that this would be like, because you actually have like paper cuts, like paper dolls. It's really what they are. Double taped to a wall that's been handwritten. And this particular one was called Se van los seres, the beings are leaving, and this was done at the time that Haiti had that meltdown where so many people were lost. And it wound up being in a Miami private collection with writing and wall and everything. So you never know what people are gonna like. Just be true to what you want to say, or as true as you can. This was un vehículo para viajar. If you've noticed by now, this many years in the United States later, I still think in Spanish first. I have an accent. My grandmother kept me very connected to my roots. And
Translate.
un vehículo para viajar, a vehicle for traveling. And on the teletype that's here, an LED sign, I have fragments taken from conversations with people of all different types of people for all different reasons about their migratory experiences. So you sit there and rock, and in an ideal world, I'm still not done with this because I want to engineer it, and I haven't figured it out, but I will, that when you rock in the chair, the wings fly, and I haven't figured it out yet, but I will, and I will represent it. This was in Over My Rainbow at the Art and Culture Center of Hollywood. This is La Guía, the guide. There's a needle here, And the needle is guiding everybody to Oslandia. But my question is, were we already in Oz and we didn't know it? At this particular point, I'm questioning our leaving Cuba. Was that, as bad as it was that Oz and we walked away from it? And I didn't know, because I'm not that smart, that at the particular time that this was going to be showing, it was like the 70-something anniversary of The Wizard of Oz. And the whole thing was very timely. The fact that I was working with Oslandia, because I Spanglanized it and called it Oslandia. So these are the migrants. Again, who's, and then their characteristics is, have you ever been called a floater? Have you ever, are you the maid? Do you need to sit down? And all this traveling that we do, and for the reasons that we do, which I put on the wheels, the proverbial wheels that my mother talked to me about in 1969. And why is it that we're still traveling, even internally? But basically, that's what I was questioning here. And this is 106 inches by 22. And it's in a private collection, along with this one, ladrones, which means thieves. They're taking a clothesline and a palm tree. This was leaving Oslandia. The shoes were cast on people's feet from my family. They're clay. And they have actually the feeling of when you walk on grass, I put the grass inside the shoes. And these are different people in my family whose shoes were built on their feet. And the yellow brick road, it's different beans in stitched, tooled packets. And behind Oslandia, that they're leaving Oslandia, that's actually a mirror from a bedroom set that I found on the side of the road, and I veiled it with my embroidery. So when you're looking at this piece, you see your own reflection into leaving Oslandia, so it personalizes the piece to whatever your trip is. These are shoes from that installation. And I made them all glittery red. Why can't we all have ruby slippers? Why not? This is 90,000 millas, 90,000 miles. This is a coloring pencil mixed media drawing that I just finished now, but when I took the picture, it wasn't finished. So this was a work in progress, and it's 90,000 miles, which is at least however many miles are on a migrant's history. This is new work. This is the egg mutations that I was talking about. I did this the day that Fidel Castro died, and these are cut and painted paper. Every single item that's there, it's an independent little doll that then gets grouped, glued, glazed, and it becomes this painting, but it's not a painting on canvas, it's work on paper. And this is called El Día de su Muerte, the day of his death. In the full picture of it, there's kids flying kites and people smoking cigars, and it was such a fiasco on 8th Street outside of Versailles that I'm like, there's information here for me. So the figures are painted and then cut out and regroup however I see fit. This is a self-portrait. It's called Balthazar, like Melchor, Gaspar, and Balthazar, the three kings. I brought the palm tree. This is here, El Sastre y su Madre, the tailor and his mother. This is here, and this is she se cosió un cielo. She sewed herself a sky. This is al combate. In our national anthem in Cuba, the first words are al combate. Let's go to combat. Al combate correr vaya meses. Cuba, we're very gregarious. Combat for us, it's just like a dance troupe down 8th Street. We're already combating. We're combating so many things. Stereotypical. I'm combating gender issues. I'm combating national confusion, a lot of different things. But the piece itself, which is 100 and something by 20 because it's the other half of the previous board, it's part of the Egg Mutations series. All these people are half bird, half whatever, and the background, it's created by spraying through antique lace. This is part of that series, the Little Havana Venetians. The finished one of this, which is a triptych, was on exhibit at the Box Gallery opening exhibition. This is that same treatment. I don't know if I'm afraid of a very large spans of paper, but I feel much more comfortable, and I can call it more my own approach, if I break everything down to items and then group them together. So I might not even have the complete vision of what I'm doing, and that's why you said something about me that you didn't know, but you did. Doing things differently, inventing your way to tell your stories, I'm definitely very comfortable in that category. And this, when I was a little boy, I did this under the dining room table. I made worlds with these little paper dolls that were then taken out to the backyard and set on fire because it was faggy. So, right before she died, she says to me, "You're making paper dolls, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Bitch, yes." See the rabbits? We used to grow rabbits for food. This is a cast of characters, and this is a self-portrait also. These are not great pictures, but it's not that they're such bad pictures, it's that I am already visually impaired. So the latest work that I'm doing for Egg Mutations, as fuzzy as it is, looks straight up to me. So that's like my new reality. And this is el ave bipolar, the bipolar bird. This is baseleando. You know how there's a new term, you're basiling when you go to Art Basel? I Spanglanize it, baseleando. And this is all my artwork, like the shoes that I showed you before, the 3 pieces, some of the work that's here. And around the time of Fidel Castro's death, since he was such news, I have him here laying down on a bed, growing a palm tree from his belly button as an art installation. I really wish that these would read clearer, but the truth is they're fussy paintings. But that's what I was still working on it. When you come up to it in person, you see a lot of transparency, a lot of detail. Because I work like this, you have to come up to my work to see what I'm talking about. It doesn't read from a distance, regardless how big it may be. This is Back to the Garden from Egg Mutations. This is Back to the Garden 2 from Egg Mutations. Everything you see there, it's a cutout drawing, replaced in whatever atmosphere I want. And many of the grass are individual blades of grass that are 3-dimensional and create shadows, and you would actually have to box it in a little shadow box or something not to lose that. This is from Egg Mutations. This is a portrait of Jorge Larios, a friend of mine from childhood, and this is, they got their visas. San Lázaro, Santa Bárbara, y la Caridad del Cobre. I have since finished it. These are basically Catholic saints like you have the little statues that people pray to, or they do in most Cuban households, and a lot of Italian households have these little saints, and some people that are not even religious have found them years later in like antique stores and collect them. They used to be hinged and with real fabric clothes and with gold 18-karat gold ornaments, and they're very collectible. But Cuba, it's so bad that even the saints got visas. And I'm done.